She spoke last time. She was the only one from the group that spoke. Yeah. So with that, we'll get started tonight with the December 6th edition of our county council meeting. Tonight, our invocation, we welcome back Pastor Rick DeMint from Free Will Baptist Church. Thanks very much, Rick, for coming back. And our Pledge of Allegiance from Terry Hollander. Please stand and remove your caps.
Father, we bow before you tonight to say thank you for all of your gifts to us. As we think of this special Christmas season, as John said, "Oh, what manner of love the Father has bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God." But Father, you said, "To whom much is given, much is required." We pray for your wisdom and leadership, that, Father, we might use what you've given to us for your honor and your glory, that, Lord, people's lives may be blessed. Father, direct those who are making decisions. Father, direct those who will be obedient and follow them. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Joe Cronin.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Brazel.
Here.
Councilmember Dave Hammond.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Elam.
Here.
Councilmember Terry Hollander.
Here.
Councilmember Nancy Schneider.
Here.
Councilmember John White.
Here.
First on the agenda tonight is conditional use permits, bills for introduction, starting with bill number 5015.
Bill number 5015, requested by Michael Hurlbert, sponsored by Joe Brazel, an ordinance granting conditional use permit CUP 21-17 for a 115-foot tall monopole telecommunication tower with adjustments to height, setback, and spacing standards set forth in Section 404.505A1 OSCCMO to Gerald L. Wolf and Sharon Wolf, property owners, and Selective Solutions LLC applicant.
So with that, we invite community development. Robert, to be
Do
sworn
you
in.
solemnly swear that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
The floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you. As mentioned, the location is 3678 Highway D. That's just a little bit east of Highway DD in the southwestern portion of the county. You may remember that the county has a whole class of telecommunication towers that are allowed by right, but when they exceed certain height requirements or setbacks or separation distance between towers, requires a conditional use permit, and that's why we're here tonight. The applicant is proposing to build a telecommunication tower that would exceed the 85-foot height to 115 feet and would reduce setbacks from 115 feet to the property line to 65 feet and reduce the minimum separation distance from an existing tower from 1 mile, which is 5,280 feet, to 500 feet. And in that last instance, the tower in question is on the neighboring property. There's an existing tower. The nearest residence to this proposed tower is about 370 feet away. I would note that the location on this lot, which is very narrow and very deep, is towards the back and within some woods. You've received a full packet that explains in detail what the proposal is and the specifics on nearest residences and other structures involved. And also at the Planning Zoning Commission meeting, interestingly, the applicants showed photographs of a drone that was flying at the proposed height of the tower and photographs taken from different vantage points from nearby roadways, and that's also in your packet as well, that information. So that way you can get a sense of what the height of the tower would be relative to the nearest streets and structures. Excuse me. One purpose, if you are interested to know, one purpose of the county's required 1 mile minimum spacing distance between towers is to reduce the proliferation of cell towers and also to reduce visual impacts or visual intrusions onto the rural landscapes. The Planning and Zoning Commission held a public hearing on November 17th, and after holding that public hearing and taking public comment, they recommended at a vote of 0 in favor and 6 against issuance of this conditional use permit for this tower at this location. And the Planning and Zoning Division concurs with that recommendation as injuring the use and enjoyment of the single-family residence at 3650 Highway D, and also failing to state and show good cause for exceeding the county's standards.
Any questions for Robert at this point? Seeing none, I would ask you to introduce the applicant if they're present.
Sure, we've got tonight Eric Martin and Jackson Nittinger.
Gentlemen, would you like to come forward? Understand you have a presentation.
Yes, sir, I do.
Ask you to be sworn in first. If you're both going to speak, I'd ask you both be sworn in.
Do you both solemnly swear that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Jackson Nadinger. I'm with Selective Solutions here on behalf of Parallel Towers. Staff report kind of went through, what we're proposing. I understand in your packets, you were given some information as well that kind of outlined the specifics of what we were proposing. I'd like to, if I could, enter another packet into evidence.
Just give it.
And that packet is what I'll be kind of moving through here very briefly. Let's see. So this first page is a zoning concept plan. This was submitted to the planning department, kind of outlining the overall project and proposal. Here we've got a site plan showing the shape of the parcel with the proposed location kind of near the far south end. If you can see my mouse here, off to the west, south, and east is all heavily wooded areas. So we're tucked back in an area that is protected visually from the neighboring properties. Here's a few more details. This is showing the existing structures on the property. It's the existing use is a storage facility. And this actually shows kind of on the top right of the image here, the existing structure. Here's a kind of depiction of the tower. It would be, we're proposing a monopole style tower, single pole, and you can see here it's being constructed for a minimum of 3 carriers. So the anchor tenant, which is AT&T in this case, and then 2 additional future tenants with room for more. So this this green pin in the center of the search ring shows it's sitting right next to the existing tower that is currently owned by SBA. AT&T has antennas on that tower, and we are proposing another tower at the proposed tower placement pin to the south. What we're seeing on this slide, that red circle, the staff report did mention the setback and radius of that tower. The code calls for a 1-to-1 setback. This is a circle with a radius of 115 feet, which is the height of the proposed structure, showing that there's no existing structures within that area. This is a snip of your zoning map showing that the subject property is zoned C1. And if we go back up to the overall ring, when initially looking for a site, we did contact every property owner within this ring. There's a larger RV storage lot kind of in the northwestern corner They were not interested. There is a fire department that was also considered. They also declined the offer. And so we did proceed with applying for this C1 location. Next few slides are the Missouri revised statutes. It's the Missouri Siting Bill is what we call it, the shorthand name. And my colleague, Eric Martin, can address that in more detail, how that affects this proposal. And now we're moving into the site photographs. So these photographs really help illustrate this is from the site looking north, the tree line being on the eastern property line, showing that coverage. This is looking south. This is back looking north with the back against the woods that we just saw. Again, just kind of illustrating the surrounding foliage. This is a map showing there several photos on the following pages where we did the drone test. So again, we hired a drone pilot to essentially park the drone at the proposed location, 115 feet in the air. And this blue dot that you see in the middle, this is the view, the location of the drone, showing and you actually can see over on the left-hand side, I'm not sure if that's showing up. This is the existing structure there. Here's another photograph. You can see off in the distance. That would be the visual impact. And here again is the existing structure. Again, existing structure here with this blue dot indicating the location of the drone. Next up, this is something else that Mr. Martin will address. This is the Federal Telecommunications Act of 1996. We also have some statements here from some folks at AT&T that I'd like to run through briefly. These really outline the why for this proposal. So we were contacted by AT&T, Parallel was, as part of their high rent relocation program. So
High rent relocation?
High rent relocation program,
Just want to
correct.
make sure I understood you correctly.
Sure, yeah. So essentially what this program is the RF engineers take a look at high rent sites, cost prohibitive sites, where in this instance is AT&T is on a tower owned by SBA Communications, where they due to the distance from the existing tower to any other available structures, essentially have a monopoly on this area. And so any carrier that wants to come in and cover this area is really at the whim of SBA's demands for exorbitant rent. And so this program aims to identify those sites that are, due to increased costs, have not been upgraded kind of in line with other sites in the area. I can tell you that this tower in particular, and it's not just upgrades, but anytime, you go to the tower and you just turn a screw, SBA is going to increase rent. And so this tower currently does not have 5G. It very well could have 5G. It does not because of the cost that would be imposed by the monopoly run by SBA. And again, this is prop maps. I'm going to kind of flick back and forth between existing coverage and proposed coverage. And this is just to illustrate that the aim here is not really new coverage. It's not new, covering new or different subscribers. The aim is to maintain the current coverage while gaining that coverage on a structure that can be upgraded feasibly. The next item is, it's another statement from AT&T. This is a sworn statement from Mr. Tim Brenner. He is the Director of Network Planning for AT&T Wireless. And this kind of goes on to state that, AT&T's been on this SBA tower for just about 19 years. And throughout that time, there has been, per the master lease agreement between AT&T Wireless and SBA, there have been countless increases to the rent that's being charged, not just, normal escalation throughout the years, and then as upgrades are made, equipment is swapped, things of that nature. In fact, the current rent charged by SBA to co-locate on this particular SBA tower is over 1.5 times what Parallel would be charging AT&T to co-locate on their tower. And over the next 20 years, the difference in rent paid would be well over $1 million. So in just the current lifetime of this site for AT&T, over $1 million would be the difference. So I mean, we're not talking nickels and dimes. Additionally, decommissioning a tower, decommissioning a site rather, is not something that's done lightly. AT&T is going to incur significant capital expense up front, but despite that cost up front, it would more than make up for the changes in rent in the 20 years. And lastly here is FirstNet. I'd like to talk about that for just a moment, briefly. FirstNet is it's a separate network for first responders only. So if you recall back, it was created around the time of 9/11 when, no one could make a phone call, no one could, all of the capacity that was there was used up by people, concerned citizens trying to find loved ones, things of that nature. So what FirstNet is doing is creating a separate network that is specifically for first responders, police, fire, EMT, that won't succumb to that sort of traffic in the case of an emergency. So. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Eric Martin, who can talk a bit more about the state statute, how that applies to our proposal.
Great, thank you, Jackson. Good evening, members of the council. So I wanted to address one of the legal aspects of our request. I think that if you view this request for the tower in isolation for this tower, I don't think it would be that controversial. I think where the controversy arises is the proximity to the other tower and the fact that there's a part of the county ordinance talks about a 1-mile separation. In that regard, and I've shared this opinion with Mr. O'Sullivan, we believe that the Missouri Siting Act requires that, again, this application be viewed on its own without reference to the other tower. And the reason for that is that the Missouri Siting Act, 67.5094, subparagraph 2, talks about that an authority shall not evaluate an application based on the availability of other potential locations for the placement of wireless support structures or wireless facilities. Now, SBA has an interest, obviously, in preventing this tower from being built, and you'll hear in a moment from SBA's attorney, who will no doubt oppose this, and will argue that this statute does not apply to your 1-mile ordinance. But I would submit to you there's no way that you can read this ordinance and its prohibition on looking at the availability of other potential locations without that running into conflict with the 1-mile ordinance. It would be similar to saying that a drunk driving law doesn't deal with alcohol. it's implied. There's no way possible, again, that you can look at this statute without that coming into play. And so as a result, you have to look at this application based upon its own merit. And in the packet, you've got in front of you, we talk about the reasons why we meet the good cause exception for conditional use permits. The additional feet, the 115 feet, that's needed to meet the coverage objectives. It's not possible to do what AT&T wants to do without that. And there will be co-location spots for 2 additional carriers on this tower as well. You've heard Jackson talk about the economic feasibility issue and the impediment that the current lease structure provides to putting the best technology for this part of St. Charles County in this area, the 5G and the FirstNet type of protection service that can be provided to first responders in St. Charles County. All of that is impeded by the current SBA lease structure. So again, all that's in our packet, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of those areas. So based upon the Missouri Siding Act and the prohibition that it places upon local authorities being able to examine another tower as a reason to oppose, and also the fact that the Telecommunications Act of 1996 also does require competent and substantial evidence to deny a tower, I submit to you that our position is that we meet the requirements of the conditional use permit. The fact also that this is in a sloped area of the property where the grade of the property goes down, it's nestled within trees, and we provided the photographic evidence that shows minimal visual intrusion. All of those reasons support the granting of the conditional use permit in this case. And with that,
So with that, I would open it up to questions from the council for the applicant. Seeing none, I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So at this point, we will now open it up for public comment. Any individual supporting or opposing the application is invited to share their comments with the council. Council staff will call you forward one at a time. Each speaker that has submitted a speaker card. Upon the conclusion of individual comments, please remain at the podium for any follow-up questions from council staff or the applicant may have of you. We encourage you to keep your comments to 3 minutes. Should another speaker have shared the same information that you have shared already, feel free to say ditto, and that record will be reflected that your opinion has already been stated. So with that, first speaker. Welcome, sir. Would you please be sworn in?
Thank you. Yes,
Do you solemnly swear that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. Thank you.
State your name, please.
My name is Zach Buckite. I'm here with the Stinson Law Firm. It's in Clayton, Missouri. It's at 7700 Forsyth. And I'm here on behalf of SBA, who we've heard a little bit about. So I'm going to rework the order of my presentation a little bit. And if you allow, I think I might take just a little bit of additional time in 3 minutes, considering we're an interested party and my client has the tower directly adjacent to the proposed tower, if that's okay with the council. The first thing I'd like to point out, and I think it's maybe the most important consideration, well, one of the most important considerations to take into account tonight is the why. You heard the representative from Selective talk about the why as to why we're here. I think the why is often the most important question to ask. You heard about a high rent relocation program, and I think that says it all. The reason we're here is because AT&T is not happy with its contract. AT&T signed a lease with my client, SBA. SBA owns the tower directly adjacent to the proposed tower, literally 350 feet away. We all know that. SBA claims that they don't want to pay the rent that our client charges. They claim that the technology is not there. It's not capable of 5G or FirstNet, that it's not economically feasible. And we heard that at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting as well. It's simply not true. I've got a letter here dated today from our client that goes through those issues, and I'll get you a copy. But essentially what this says is we have not been approached. Our site marketing manager, who handles all of the communication with AT&T at this site, has not been approached about increases in rent, about problems with 5G or FirstNet. In fact, the tower that is currently on that site, the existing tower owned by my client, is fully capable of 5G, is fully capable of FirstNet, and is fully capable of larger antennas or additional antennas. and at virtually the exact height that they're proposing, 350 feet next door. The tower they're proposing is the same height, it's the same type, and they want to do the same thing there, just charge less. I don't know exactly why. Nobody's here to speak on behalf of AT&T, but I think we can all read between the lines and see that this is a private dispute over a lease, and AT&T would like to save a little bit of money on their lease payment. They've admitted just as that it's not economically feasible for them to remain on our tower. You know, and we've kind of been painted like the bad guy here, like a bad landlord, and every time you turn a screw, we bump the rent. The exact same language. It was a different gentleman from SBA, or from Selective, used the exact same phrasing at the P&Z meeting. It's kind of funny. Every time we turn a screw, they jack up the rent. It's just not true. This letter actually says that from my client. It says, well, the most recent amendment to that lease was in 2015, and it was done at a $0 amendment for an equipment upgrade. So that's exactly opposite of what they're saying here. Not only that, but our client is willing to also offer AT&T, who's not here, upgrades to 5G and FirstNet at no additional charge. And I'll get you a copy of the letter that says just that. So this idea that we have a monopoly, it's easy to throw that word around, that we're charging exorbitant rent, is simply not true. It's really a moot point. It's actually irrelevant to your analysis. And actually the State Citing Act that the gentleman, the attorney that spoke before me cited, actually precludes you from considering that. And we'll get into that. But if you look at subsection 1, and I'll get you a copy of this statute as well, it states that you cannot consider an applicant's business decisions, the quality of service, or customer demand. Well, I think the applicant just asked you to consider all of those things. I think they asked you to consider their business decisions, the amount of rent they're currently paying. And by the way, I failed to mention this, but the lease they signed about 20 years ago had escalated increases annually built in. That means when AT&T signed this lease, it knew what it was getting into. It knew exactly where those increases were coming from. So this idea that we have a monopoly, that we're charging exorbitant rent, simply is not the case. And this statute says you cannot consider business decisions. You cannot consider quality of service, customer demand. Those maps up there that showed what your cell service is going to look like on the current tower versus the proposed tower and how it's virtually the same, this says you shouldn't consider that. So on the one hand, we're asking you to consider service and business decisions. On the other hand, we're saying, no, don't consider that there's another tower there. So you can't have it both ways. The statute is clear. I'd like to just get into the statute real quick as well. If I may, I'd just hand these out. Do you mind?
Go ahead.
If you look under subsection 2 of the statute, which was cited by the attorney who spoke before me, it says that you cannot evaluate an application based on, quote, the availability of other potential locations. You know, you don't have to be an attorney to know that availability and proximity do not mean the same thing. And if you are an attorney, you can see that as well. And by the way, here you go, I've got a picture one.
That's okay.
By the way, no court has decided this issue. No court has said, look, the state statute precludes St. Charles County or any local government from considering how far away other towers are. Nobody has said you can't have a 1-mile spacing requirement. Okay, so if you grant this variance, by the way, which is more than 90% of a variance, they're asking you to go from a mile, 5,280 feet, to less than 500. It's a 95% change. It's 4,700 feet difference. The planning and zoning director testified to that at the last meeting. He stated, we've certainly granted variances to this spacing requirement before, but never on this scale, never on the degree of 90%. And it's there for a reason. It's your code, y'all wrote it, you put it there for a reason, and he told us why. He said it's to prevent the unnecessary proliferation of cell towers across unincorporated St. Charles County. You know, I don't have the letters here in front of me, but you have them in your packet. You don't have to go any further than look at the letters in opposition from your very own residents that say, yeah, I live in that neighborhood. I live in that area. You know, I go hiking, or I'm on the rivers and streams. Look, this is unnecessary. And our tower's there, and this letter will show, and I'll get you copies here when I'm done, but it'll tell you exactly what that tower is capable of. 5G, FirstNet, bigger antennas. We're willing to talk about price with AT&T. They just haven't come to us. So, a couple things. The why we're here is, I think, AT&T isn't here to say it themselves, but I think we can all read between the lines and say, the why is here so that AT&T can save money on a lease that they agreed to 20 years ago that had the rent increases built in when they signed the thing. If you think getting into a new lease and breaking our lease is going to save you all money, you're entitled to your opinion. I don't think that's the case. I don't think anybody from AT&T would come here and say that. I've talked about the State Siding Act. Like I said, no court has said you can't consider the 1 mile spacing requirement. I really think there is a significant difference between availability and proximity. Your ordinance asks you to consider the proximity of other towers, not the availability of other locations. If your ordinance said you cannot permit a variance or a conditional use when there is a tower with capacity within a mile, that's different. Your ordinance simply says you cannot consider, or you cannot grant the variance unless good cause is stated and shown when there is a tower within a mile. It doesn't say anything about availability. So again, it's the spacing requirement, it's the setback. They're asking for a variance on the setback, which I don't think we've seen good cause shown as to why that should be granted. The height is another issue. And I think lastly, I'll just wrap up here and take any questions you might have. I think it's important to consider the precedent you're going to set here with this decision. I think it's important to consider the message you send to the next tower builder, to the next carrier, to the next wireless carrier that wants to come in and do the same thing. This is a practice that's happening across the region, across the country. Rolla is voting on this tonight. The city of Rolla is going through the exact same thing that's being presented here by the exact same tower builder, the exact same tenant, AT&T. They want to do the same thing across Missouri, across Kansas, across the country. Build unnecessary towers in beautiful places like St. Charles for no good reason to save money on rent that they agreed to decades ago. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think granting this conditional use would set poor precedent for the county, would send the wrong message to the residents and to the next tower builder and the next carrier. And we agree with the recommendation by your Planning and Zoning Commission to deny this, the 6-0 recommendation. So I'm happy to answer any question, but that's all I have for you. Thank you very much for your time.
Council have any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Staff, any questions? Does the applicant have any questions? I would ask both of you who have all these materials, if you could just email those to council staff, and they can get that to all of us. Probably be easier than trying to manage all the pieces of paper. So if you guys could all do that, that'd be fantastic.
Absolutely. 100%.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Next speaker.
Arnie Dinoff.
Do you solemnly swear that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the County Council. My name is Arnie C. A.C. Dinoff, County Public Advocate. The County Planning and Zoning Commissioners sent a resounding message to this County Council, and that message was in a 0-6 vote, no on the recommendation for this monopole tower. This application and request is about money and profits, and zero need has been identified or demonstrated nor proved where the relief is needed and why we need to deviate from our county codified code of ordinances. And as a matter of fact, the applicant is saying this is about profits and the heck with our county residents, the consumer. And we all understand and know the Federal Communication Act, and we all understand our state statute when it comes to telecommunications. Southwest St. Charles County is our jewel. It is our future, it's our economic home base, and we are known nationally for our Southwest St. Charles County. The law, both federal and state statute, are on the county's side. Beauty and obstructions are what's coming here. We have our county codified code and the existence of towers within 1 mile for a reason. There's opposition by county council members who I've spoken to, and hopefully this will be defeated by the county council. Co-locations put this issue aside, when you look at Chapter 67.5094, Revised State Statutes of Missouri, they're grasping at straws in terms of their application, and they're telling you a bunch of hogwash or things that just are not true. I would ask each county council member to read the state statute from front to back and make sure that you understand it and understand its ramifications. The clustering of towers, co-location, the tower lobbyists, unfortunately, are winning at our federal level in Congress and our state legislature because money talks. But not in this case. And it has been demonstrated by the previous speaker by me, which I totally agree with. I ask that this county council draw land in the sand. There is availability. Enough is enough for pure profits. We have legal sound footing, and our county ordinance has never been challenged by any carrier or any tower owner. I ask that this county council instill and adhere to the 85-foot height rule that's in the ordinance. It requires an engineer review by a third party, paid for by the applicant, but somebody who's going to give real truth and real information, and that was not presented either here or at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. So they're asking for a 30-foot variance. I do not see the hardship or an engineer reason for in detail, and we need to be, I want to contest this point right there. The fall zone is of major concern. As you all know, this is a storage lot. It's open to the public, and the public has access to this lot. But the fall zone is not adequate enough in case it falls. We don't want our county residents, in terms of a storm, to be maimed or to lose their life. It's about the health, safety, and welfare of the public who uses the affected property and a safe fall zone. That has not been provided in this application. If this county council would be presumed pressured to approve this application, I ask that a condition that this pole look like a pine tree to mend in with the neighborhood and its tall trees at that corner of Z and Highway D. This is going to be temporary technology. This company is formed an LLC, limited liability company, for a reason. Once they go out of business and we go to satellites in 5 or 10 years, this will be obsolete technology. And the LLC will not have the assets to adequately remove the tower at its present location. I would ask that the county council instill a $75,000 bond that if the tower is abandoned or not used within 1 year, that money be allotted to be used for removal and restoration of the property. Please vote no for big corporation profits because of a rent increase. It's clear that the applicant wants their own pole because they don't want to pay for rent. And as a matter of fact, the owner of the tower said that the rent has not been increased on numerous occasions. Please vote no for the residents' side of the affected area in the neighborhood. This is our county, and we need to instill the beauty and the quality of Southwest St. Charles County. There were 6 emails of full opposition that are on file and record with the Planning and Zoning Commission, which hopefully is part of your packet. If it goes forward, please place my recommendations on the conditional use permit because it's only just and only the fair thing to do. We are getting squeezed by large corporations. Please protect our residents and our county. Please make sure that our codified code that has not been challenged in any court of law is upheld by this county council. We should not be caught in the middle of a turf war and rental wars. If you would approve this conditional use permit, you are in essence throwing out our legal and valid codified ordinance for towers, and it might as well just be a free-for-all. A judge or a jury may have to decide this case, and I am willing to bank my experience, my knowledge, and I will make sure that I will do everything I possibly can to defeat this measure in the court of law because I feel that our ordinance should be legal, proper, and it stands on its own merits. I ask this county council unanimously deny this application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Council have any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, thank you for coming. Any other speakers?
There are not.
So with that, I would entertain discussion on this matter. Anyone have any comments from the council that they would wish to make at this time? Anyone have any follow-up questions? Would the applicant like to make any closing statements?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on one thing that the previous speaker was talking about, which he referred to it as a fall zone. We don't like to use the F word. These towers are designed to not fail. However, I do have a depiction here that I can email everyone.
That'd be great.
I'm not sure, can I use this thing?
You can use that. You can move those Lysol wipes out of the way if you want.
I'm not sure if that.
It has a small delay. It'll come up.
Okay.
There it is.
There you go.
So this is an aerial shot, this is an aerial shot using Google Earth. This is showing a radius or fall zone, as it has been referred to, of 115 feet, which is the height of the existing tower. You can see here that radius falls on not only the subject property's lot, but it also is encompassing, I've got a count of 6 structures. Whereas, the tower that we are proposing does not encompass any existing structures. So just wanted to point that out for clarification.
Did you have something you wanted to add?
I would just quickly add that this is relatively a new statute, that the Missouri Siding Act, and Mr. Bokai was correct that there's not a lot of reported case law on it. I would suggest that in terms of a challenge to this, from St. Charles County perspective, this does not seem like a good one to challenge because of how this one is positioned, back in those trees, in the woods, in an area that's not going to be visually obtrusive. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from council? Seeing none, this will conclude the public comment portion on this conditional use permit, and we would move on to bill number 5016.
Bill number 5016, requested by Michael Hurlbert, sponsored by Joe Brazel, an ordinance granting conditional use permit CUP 21-18 for a bed and breakfast residence up to 8 guests per night to Chickadee Acres LLC property owners and Lisa Mallon, applicant.
Robert? You've already been sworn in, so
thank
you're
you.
good.
Appreciate it.
You've been sworn in, you can be sworn at.
Right.
Just kidding.
Second conditional use permit.
It's not going to happen tonight, right? We're
Totally
not gonna do
separate
that.
conditional use permit for this. Again, at 2818 South Point Prairie Road, and this is near Minershagen, if you know where that is. It's in the portion of the county that's zoned agricultural for several miles around it. The application is to operate a bed and breakfast residence for up to 8 guests per night. And the reason I emphasize word residence, that definition includes a host that lives on the site, interacts with guests. That's the way that's one of our ordinance requirements. The existing residence for this is about 1,000 feet back right now from South Point Prairie Road, and is about 500 feet from the nearest residence. So at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, a next door neighbor came and spoke, and there was some discussion about access and being a good neighbor and some comments on that. And the Planning and Zoning Commission asked the applicant to speak to the neighbor and to try to work out differences in that regard. But in the end, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval subject to specific conditions provided in the attached bill. And the Planning and Zoning Division concurs with this recommendation and views the proposed use with conditions as complying with the conditional use permit criteria that's contained in your packet. I should also mention that this is an existing house. The changes that they're proposing to make are the addition of 7 parking spaces around the house and a sign for the identifying the bed and breakfast residents on South Point Prairie Road. We have here tonight Lisa Milan, the applicant, if you have any questions for her.
Anybody have any questions for staff?
Yeah, what did you say the vote was by planning zoning?
The vote was 6 for approval and 0 for denial.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa, would you like to come up?
Yes, sir.
And you'll be sworn in?
Do you solemnly swear that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
State your name, please.
Lisa Milan.
Lisa, what would you like to tell us about this?
In May, I purchased an 11-acre property in unincorporated Wentzville, which includes a lovely 3,543 square foot, 4-bedroom, 3.5-bath home from which I would like to operate a bed and breakfast called Chickadee Farm. It's an ideal home for this type of venture, charmingly decorated with furnishings that I bought here on Main Street in Old St. Charles. It's close to quaint country wineries, tourist attractions, and just 6 minutes from Interstate 70. I will be living in the home. It is my primary residence, and I'll be personally attending to the guests so as to inform them about the history and attractions of our region. I received unanimous approval from the Planning and Zoning Committee a few weeks ago, and I thank you for considering my application this evening. So I ask you, will you please grant me the conditional use permit so my dreams can be fulfilled?
Any questions or comments about from the applicant?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am?
It's recommended by the staff that if the CUP is granted, that there would be certain conditions. Are you aware of those?
Yes, ma'am, and I've been in communication with Mr. Agee regarding the residential code requirements for sprinklers. Is that the one that you're referring to?
The one I'm talking about says that all trees illustrated on the site plan shall be maintained in healthy condition or replaced with healthy trees, that the parking must occur in parking areas designated on the site plan, no more than 8 guests, and then it does talk about fire suppression. And the site plan has to be submitted and approved.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and you're willing to comply with those as well?
Yes, I actually talked to the tree guy this morning.
Okay. I don't have any other questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Brazel?
I missed that condition. I got a question for Mike. I guess Jared's not here, so.
Or Robert?
No, it's a building, it's on the sprinkler system. Or whoever.
Lisa will
Mike,
get back to you.
Why and when did we start telling residential,
Do you solemnly swear that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Mike, when and where did we start telling this type of development had to have a sprinkler system in it, in a residential house?
I don't have the history specifically of when that originated, but it's been part of the building code that we have in place.
There's not one bed and breakfast down in our county that's got a sprinkler system in it.
Correct.
So I don't know why we're making her do this.
A certain occupancy will trigger it. So if it's only 4 people or something like that, then that wouldn't require it. But the 8 people does.
Well, I mean, she could just say she's gonna have 6 people in there and 8 people would show up and we'd never know it. I mean, so we're gonna have a conversation on this on the side, and I don't agree with that condition, because that is extremely expensive, and you may not be able to afford that with your business model. We've never done that before on this council. And so we'll revisit that. It's nothing to hash out right here, but I don't think that's necessary at all on a residential CUP.
Mr. Cronin?
I agree with Mr. Brazel on this one. I wasn't blessed to have 8 kids, but if I had 8 kids, would I have to have a sprinkler system? Okay,
No.
So my question would be this, would be this. With all the development of the Hoffman family properties down there, we're gonna get more of these. I have no particular problems with hers. I think 11 acres of ground, a nice house. I saw what she's wanting to do, trails and animals, everything's gonna be wonderful. But we might want to revisit the rules that he's deciding on some of this stuff, not only for just the sprinkler systems, but everything, because I think you're going to see a big influx of these. And if you've got recommendations of things we got to change on that before we start getting a bunch of them in, maybe we need to take a look at that.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts here real quick. So first off, obviously residential would not be triggered. So if you're a family unit, that doesn't
You can have 20 kids.
I said that as a point of
Yeah.
order.
I was the oldest of 7, so my parents' house
There's
had
still
7
gonna be,
bedrooms. So that could
you know,
be.
her family, and a few others, probably less than a dozen people in the structure.
Sure, sure. But the second thing is the code is written in blood. There was a reason why it's put in place. There was a bed and breakfast somewhere at some time that burned and people lost their lives. And that's the reason the code is in place. It's not that something that we invented or created or think it's a great idea. We adopted the code based on practicality of real-world situations.
What's the fire district code in that? Does it require that? Dave probably knows
Mr. Hammond
that.
might know.
Yeah, I don't think it really matters. Because it's in our building code, the fire districts have it in theirs, and they're gonna require it.
Okay.
So
Well, that's
that,
actually not true, but
well,
Augusta didn't even have to do fire inspections, so they don't have a fire marshal, they don't do building inspections of any kind, so.
is this in their fire protection district?
I don't know, they didn't
I
come
thought
out-
this
they-
was in
they don't do
Winsville's.
fire- They don't do fire inspections, I call them and
I
ask
think
them.
it's in Winsville's fire protection.
No, she is not in Augusta, but I'm making a point that it's still a rural area, that she's in a rural area, and like you said, we can't, this fire sprinkler thing, I've never heard of this before, and in a residential environment like this. And Joe's right, you could have 10 kids in a house, you don't require it. This is a residential house she's living in. A fire suppression system is gonna cost a lot of money, and these bed and breakfasts they're not getting wealthy on this stuff. I mean, it's more of a passion than anything.
Quick question. Is it 6 and more? Is it 4 and more? What's the number that requires?
I know there's a trigger. I don't remember the specific number, so
I
I couldn't tell you right this second.
I was just curious about that, if there's a specific number that requires that trigger. So to Joe's point, if the number is 6, if she changes or amends her application to 6 for this, then she wouldn't have to have a sprinkler system put in the system, Mr. Cronin.
Another question was, have you got a price for a sprinkler system at all? I mean, depends on the structure. If it's relatively low cost, it may not be a big deal. If it's really, it could put a wrench in your plans if it's extremely high cost.
I so thank you all for jumping in to maybe eliminate this expense for me. My ceilings are higher than this ceiling. So to actually put a sprinkler system in would be very, very expensive for me. I have not gotten any bids on it, but I will tell you, I did have a conversation with Mr. Agee, and he said that he does not like this law, and he's going to change it next year.
You better run for council.
We may not want to say that right now, but let's just stick with the case at hand and current law that we have in front of us.
We'll talk about this on the side, and
Yeah.
you don't want to do it's just, and the one case you cited, Mike, I get it, but just because that happened doesn't mean that we gotta,
So
it's
with-
unfortunate, but stuff happens.
To Mr. Brazel's point, we'll discuss that offline, shall they say, in another time, another place. But does anyone else have questions for this applicant? So with that, thank you very much. We may call you back up in a little bit, so stay close by.
Thank you all very much.
So with that, stop me if you've heard this before. We'll now open it up for public comment. Any individual supporting or opposing the application is invited to come share their comments with the council. Council staff will call you forward one at a time. Upon conclusion of the individual comments, please remain at the podium for any follow-up questions for council staff or the applicant may have of you. First speaker is?
Arnie Dienoff.
Mr. Dinoff, you've already been sworn in, so.
Thank you very much, members of council. Mr. Chairman, my name is Arnie C. A.C. Dienoff, County Public Advocate. I'm in full favor of this application. It's just something that's right down our alley. Something that we really need to have is tourism. This will bring additional rural tourism to St. Charles County. It will provide additional visitor stay opportunities. It will provide economic development, and it's a great addition to our county. This will align with the new Hokel Parkway that just opened up 2 weeks ago, just south of I-70. It will have little impact on the area or to the neighborhood. Hopefully, the neighbor issues can be amicably agreed upon and worked out There was testimony from one of the neighbors about privacy, about the safety of his children, and about a driveway that will encompass around his property with this proposal. As I've asked that this be passed, I would ask the following conditions be placed on the applicant. Number one, that Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA compliance is adhered to. That the fire safety codes initiated by the Fire Protection District, they're going to have to pass mustard with the Fire Protection District. And that she wants to have a large sign. I don't have a problem with that, but she wants to put other signs along South Prairie Point Road. And that would be on other people's property, and that would not be conducive without their permission or without some type of rental space agreement. I would also like a condition of a solid privacy fence along the neighbor's property that's in front of her 11 acres. I also ask that a condition be placed that the roadway setback be properly followed and not be put on the property line as is depicted on the application. And I believe that the code requires a 25-foot setback of a roadway. But I ask unanimous consideration and passage of the council at the later meeting later on at the end of December. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, thank you. Any other speakers?
It's the final speaker on that CUP.
And just for the record, that is the New Melly Fire District that they are in. Donna's our game, as always. Any other questions or comments from council? Seeing none. Thank you very much for coming. That concludes the public comment portion of this conditional use permit. We will take this up in 2 weeks for a final vote. Unless, of course, there's something that comes up between now and then and we table it, so we'll wait and see how that goes. Sounds like there may be more to come. With that, we will move on to public hearing on the 2022 budget for St. Charles County. Are there any speakers to speak on this public comment?
I have no speaker cards on the public hearing.
Yes, sir.
I have a blank one here. It has no subject.
Come on down. I was surprised that there wasn't a card, so.
Thank you very much, members of council. Once again, Arnie C. A.C. Dienoff, County Public Advocate. This budget this year is $104 million. It's nothing to be sneezed at, and there needs to be cohesiveness, there needs to be honesty, transparency, and trying to look out after the taxpayer. That's your job, is fiscal responsibility, fiduciary responsibility. I would ask that we use more of our county auditor. We really don't hear from our county auditor and his auditing staff. I would ask that we look at some waste and abuse among county departments and county offices to reduce that type of waste. We want to save every possible dollar possible. Administrative salaries in the Office of County Executive. There is a disparity, and a perfect example is the Director of Administration this year in this current annual budget is making $197,000 plus benefits plus a pension. With your proposed pay rate to the other employees, the Director of Administration will be receiving a $10,000 pay increase or more. And so there's that disparity when you look at the people compared to the employees in the trenches and out in the field, considering our police officers who respond to emergency situations each and every day and get nowhere the amount of salary with the positions that are paid in the county executive's office. It is shameful with those positions in the county executive's office, and I ask the public to look at the salaries and look at the responsibilities. We have 2 directors of administration that are now making over $130,000. We have a chief of staff to the county executive that is making a considerable salary, and we have a director of communications that talks for the county executive that's making 6 figures. And it's time that we start to rein in these political patronage positions and look after the taxpayers instead of the buddies of the county executive. The captain's pay came up in many of the workshop sessions. Our county police department. We have one captain that doubled his salary that went from patrol officer to captain. That's unheard of in the field of police public safety. We have 3 other captains that have been there 42 years, 30 years, and I believe 36 years. One's getting ready to retire at the end of this year. But they haven't topped out. And so I want fairness and cohesiveness across the board and not playing favoritism to certain political buddies or political friends here. So that issue really needs to be discussed in detail before we make any harsh recommendations, because it's going to cost taxpayers $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 in additional funds. Corrections officer pay. As we all know, St. Louis County has increased their correction officer pay by $3. We have 80 vacancies in our Department of Corrections. We need to attract employees to make a safe environment at our Justice Center down the hill. I ask that you look at those and treat those correction officers as law enforcement. We don't look at them like that in this county, and it's a crying shame. They put up with just as much safety issues, just as much responsibility as a law enforcement officer does, and we need to start treating our corrections officers in that fashion. The jail renovation proposal. As you all know, you hired a fancy consultant. They say that it's going to cost $150 million in renovations. I am confident from that study of the consultant that you can build a new facility for $75 to $85 million with county-owned land on TRQs in O'Fallon next to the police station. It makes sense. Why invest in a building that just doesn't have the technology and the needs when you can build a state-of-the-art facility that would be the marvel of our nation for half the cost? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Federal prisoner housing. What I don't understand is why we're canceling that project. I know that we're down 80 employees, but it costs $32 to house each prisoner per day. The reimbursement from the federal government is $80, and if somebody would negotiate contracts better with our county, you can get $136 of what the federal government pays to other Missouri and other Illinois counties in southern Illinois and southern Missouri. I don't understand why we're not getting the $136. It would more than pay for itself, and it would give you the money to give additional pay raises to our corrections officers that desperately need them. The police department requests for 4 patrol officers. I believe in Chief Frizz and his leadership ability, and when he tells you he needs those 4 officers, he needs them because of our population growth, our response to calls reduction that needs to be put in place, and officer safety and backups on calls where some of our officers are the lone officer at some of these domestic calls or other such public safety related calls. He needs our resources, and we need to have his back in his department. We need to put law enforcement at the top priority to make sure that they have the necessary tools and the necessary employees with our ever-growing county and population to keep up with today's times. So I would ask that you approve I believe it's going to be $400,000 for the salaries, for the new vehicles, for the uniforms, and for the equipment to put these 4 police officers out in the trenches, out on patrol. The Office of Communication and TV Operations, we have numerous employees in this department, and this department has gotten out of control. $2.6 million projected for this fiscal year. We have a public information office with a director who you pay 6 figures. We have a manager of communications. We have another manager of communications. We have public information officers for the Department of Police that are full-time, a public information officer for the Department of Public Health, a public information officer full-time for the prosecutor's office, a public information officer for the Parks Department, and a public information officer for the county counselor. That's ridiculous, because I watch the news and I look at articles and I don't see those type of articles and those type of news stories that would result in us having 6 public information officers to the tune of $750,000. It just doesn't make sense. The lobbyists that you employ. We have a lobbyist at our state legislature. We have a lobbyist for transportation issues with the Missouri Department of Transportation. And we have a lobbyist at the East-West Gateway Coordinating Council who has a conflict of interest because he sits on the advisory committee and is a former state senator of St. Charles County. That's the duty of Steve Ellman, the county executive. That's the duty of Joanne Lycum, the director of administration, that you're going to pay well over $215,000. That's the job of your chief of staff of the county executive's office. That's the job of the 2 assistant director of administration that you employ at $135,000, and I believe the other one makes $150,000. They need to be going to Jefferson City. They need to be sitting down with our legislative contingent, our state senators and our representatives, and they need to be the lobbyists, not us paying absorbent fees and absorbent expenses to a paid lobbyist, which there's an ordinance on your agenda for tonight for you to approve. The legal bills of this county are off the charts. I believe we have 17 to 21 current federal and state court litigation costs. We need to bring that in, and we need to stop the discrimination, stop the wrong treatment, and stop paying off employees when they were wronged. We need to do the right thing in the Department of Human Resources and do the right thing to avoid legal fees and payouts for employees by treating them right to begin with. Council pay. With this budget, your council salary will go over $22,000. That will be over $875 per meeting. I implore all of you to take away the full medical benefits that some of you receive and some of you forego. Each one of you that takes the medical package, it costs our county taxpayers $25,000 on an annual basis. You all qualify for a pension, which is lifetime once you go over the certain age. It's about community service, not money, and I ask that we pass a county charter amendment that each county council member gets $100 per meeting. That's just, that's right, and that's real community service. Please do away with the political patronage positions and make all county employees under the merit system and under the jurisdiction of the Merit Commission. Let's make a county charter change. ADA compliance. I ask that Americans with Disabilities Act of this office building be complied with. I would like to file a complaint, and I've asked who is the compliance officer for this building, and no one seems to know. I ask that we have Americans with Disabilities Act compliance with all county buildings, all county parks, all public sidewalks, all crosswalks. Let's spend the $104 million in income this year and $88.5 million in reserves wisely, honestly, transparently, and be cognizant of our 411 county residents. Money does not grow on the outside of the Office of County Finance, and we need to start treating this money like your own households. Some of the shenanigans, some of the contracts that we spend here in the county, you wouldn't spend in your own household or your own businesses, and it's time that we ring you in and that you be cognizant and be truthful and honest with spending our money. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else to speak?
Not on this issue.
Okay. So with that, that'll close our public hearing on the 2022 budget. Move on to public comments. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I'll call.
Oh, okay. You look like you were looking for something. So whenever we do public comments, we give you 3 minutes in which to speak. This one is timed, as opposed to everything else that we've had so far this evening. So at 3 minutes, I will ask you to wrap it up, and thank you for coming, and we'll move on to the next speaker. Our first speaker is?
Christina McCormick.
Hi, my name is Christina McCormick, and I wanted to talk to you guys about the proposed bill that you guys are going to have with Modesi. The core company that you guys are wanting to be in a contract with The Early Childhood and Youth Development Professionals for Kansas City and Missouri. They have things on their, in their program that are concerning. On page 13, under the content area 5, Health and Safety Promoting Risk Management Practices, Level 1, it states, under Part A, others by following health, safety, regulations, and policies, and ensures to health and safety regulations and policies, articulates and monitors adherence to regulations, policies pertaining to health and safety. And on your workshop calendar on December 6th, that's today, it states that some of those items that will be discussed would be including prevention of control of infectious diseases, including immunizations. The lessons plans from this company include learning objectives, which state become familiar with what to be expected when they get immunizations, discuss why we get immunizations and how they are important, and so how would they teach it to the kids? They would be reading a book such as Buzz the Bee Talks About Immunizations, or Elliot's books about shots, all approved by this care company that you guys, the health care consulting company. There are many parents out there that do not vaccinate their kids, and then there's also parents out there that do vaccinate their kids, but with the newest vaccine that's come out, they are concerned and wanting to wait or not do it at all. This feels like another push to promote immunizations, especially for COVID-19. Your order that you put in for this, it states that these contracts will benefit the residents of St. Charles County and enhance their quality of life. And I was just curious how Mike and Sarah define if someone's life has been enhanced. And I want to know if the people of St. Charles County have to agree with their definition. There's some other issues with this same company here, which is part of that document that you guys have in that bill. And it says, on page 21 of that, it says displaying cultural awareness and respect to level 3 increases own understanding of different cultural groups, including one's own cultural identities, beliefs, practices, and biases. If you're unaware of what it means to have your own biases, I have 4 words for you. That's Floyd Cobb and Francis Howe. Level 4 creates a trusting environment for employing multicultural strategies and teaching tolerance. If you're not able to pick out what's wrong with that, you're probably not paying attention. They define multicultural strategies that relate to an interest in many cultures within a society in addition to the mainstream culture. And many parents don't agree with mainstream culture, and maybe they don't want their children to fall victim to that culture, which normalizes underage drinking, over sexualizing TV shows, violent video games, gender
Thank you very
confusion,
much for
etc.
coming and speaking tonight. Next speaker.
Arnie Dinoff.
I would have thought you would have covered everything in the last one, so I'm curious what you're going to say on this one.
There you go. Thank you very much, members of council. Arnie C. A.C. Dinoff, County Public Advocate, running for County Executive. And I have the following testimony that I'd like to bring to your attention. When I came to this building tonight, I was really shocked because I've been coming to council meetings for 15 years now, and there were never any security checkpoints. Now, out of the clear blue, the rules change. I don't know exactly what sparred that. I don't know, I treat you with dignity and respect. There have been no threats made that I know of, but all of a sudden, there's 3 sheriff's deputies down in the basement, and all the other doors are locked. What is the cost to our county? What about other public meetings? What about planning and zoning meetings where they're controversial? What about Board of Adjustment meetings where there's controversial and people yell and scream at each other? Are you going to provide public safety and public security there? What triggered this? And this is another intrusion of our rights. ADA, Americans with Disabilities Access. Before I saw the 3 sheriff's deputies that kept me there for over 10 minutes, I don't know if it's just because of me, but they looked at everything in my bag, everything in my pocket. I was given the 10th degree. But the door incoming to the basement, the security checkpoint, it's not working properly on the push paddle. And so we need to make sure that that works correctly. The council room door. You have $104 million. Let's make this a priority, and let's make this building accessible to everyone. Tomorrow, December 7th, is filing for local offices at the school board, city council, and other races. Public Water District Number 2, who is totally out of control and pays their water commissioners $24,000 salary for one meeting a month. Subdistricts 2 and 5, which is Forestel, all the way down to Augusta, and Lake St. Louis, all the way down to Defiance, they need to be filled. And that filing goes through December 28th. Our $28 million county transportation half-cent sales tax, we need to be cognizant, and we need to make sure that the program is working correctly. What is the cost of Bill 5025, enacting new section 115.075? And I ask that you defeat Bill number 5026, authorizing agreement for advocacy and lobbying service. I advocate for our county more than your 3 lobbyists that you pay $375,000 because they're friends of the county executive, who's the former Speaker of the Missouri House and a former state senator of this county. It's ridiculous. Tell him to get off his butt and drive down to Jeff City in the county car at county expense and lobby.
Thank you, Mr. Dinoff. Your time has expired. Next speaker?
That was the final speaker.
Final speaker. So we'll move on to oral report from the county executive. Thank you, sir. That moves us up to the consent agenda. Any items to be removed from the consent agenda this evening? I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to accept.
Motion made. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Now we're up to bills for introduction, starting with bill number 5017.
Bill number 5017, requested by Michael Hurlbert, sponsored by Joe Cronin, an ordinance amending the zoning district map of the County of St. Charles, Missouri by rezoning land from A, agricultural district, to RR, single-family residential district, per application RZ 21-17.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Cronin.
There was a little controversy beginning of this because some misinformation got sent out that there was going to be 400 homes on this 60 acres of ground. Well, that got fixed, and what's being proposed is a 3-acre development, which is pretty consistent of developments in my area with county roads to county standards. 5-acre developments without county standards. So that being said, there were some people that had voiced some concerns about it, primarily with the water and sewer systems, which those particular systems will have to be state approved by Department of Natural Resources, so I don't have any concerns with those, okay? Additionally, there's some concerns about the traffic in the area. John Greifsue has mentioned that the county highway will be taking a look at maybe doing a small traffic study on Dietrich Road, because there's been more development out that way, and folks use it as a backdoor way to get to Innsbrook. And then lastly is everybody would like to see an outer road on the west side of 61, and I know that's on the Transportation Department's radar. So I think the transportation issues are addressed. I think the water and sewer issues are addressed that the people were concerned about. And this is the type of development, nice homes on 3-acre lots that folks in that area want. So with that said, I support this proposal.
Very well. And other comments about this bill? Seeing none, we'll move on to bill number 5018.
Bill number 5018, requested by Steve Elman, sponsored by council as a whole, an ordinance adopting and appropriating the fiscal year 2022 budget for St. Charles County, Missouri.
Any questions or comments about this bill? Seeing none, we'll move on to bill number 5019.
Bill number 5019, requested by Michael Hurlbert, sponsored by council as a whole, an ordinance authorizing the county executive to execute a subrecipient agreement with the Northeast Community Action Corporation to administer housing choice vouchers awarded to St. Charles County.
Any questions or comments about this? Seeing none, we'll move on to bill number 5020.
Bill number 5020, requested by Amanda Brower, sponsored by council as a whole, an ordinance approving the Transportation Improvement Plan for fiscal years 2022 through 2024 and corresponding intergovernmental agreements.
Any questions or comments about this bill? So with that, we'll move on to 5021.
Bill number 5021, requested by Amanda Brower, sponsored by Mike Elam, an ordinance approving a First Amendment to the intergovernmental agreement with the City of O'Fallon for construction of new roadway Caledonia Parkway.
Any questions or comments about this bill? Seeing none, we'll move on to bill 5022.
Bill number 5022, requested by Sarah Evers, sponsored by Mike Elam, An ordinance reauthorizing the county executive to execute an agreement with the Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education for child health, safety, nutrition, and other services and training as part of the Maternal and Child Health Services Block Grant, which agreement was last authorized by Ordinance 11-100.
Mr. Brazel.
Yeah, I got some questions for Ms. Sarah Evans here. No? Joanne, I want to know, this is $22,000 grant, is that what this is approximately?
Yes.
So what are we tied in that, what do we have to do? What's our tie-in by getting this, this money?
The same as it's been since 2011, which is that we provide education and training to like daycares and that type of thing about child health, about cleanliness and, how kids transmit disease and all that.
Well, because, I mean, DESE was very difficult to deal with over this COVID stuff with the schools and a lot of the recommendations and their mandates and all the stuff they were coming down on, so.
And Councilman, I don't know why the governor moved this grant from DHSS over to DESE. We can inquire if you want us to further on this.
Yeah, I won't support it, but I would like to know by us taking this $22,000, which isn't a lot of money to take to have to do certain things, because you always got to, there's always tit for tat on everything, every fund, every kind of grant you take. So I'd like to know what we're going to be tied to do and what services are they providing and vaccinations. Are they pushing vaccinations? The health department, the director of health department in our county admitted with her knowledge that how many people died of getting a vaccination within 2 days of vaccination? She said 8,500, which in reality is more like 50,000. But if you're going to push, if you knew that 8,500 people died from vaccinations, why on earth would you be pushing them? That's what I don't understand. And our director of health has been doing that. So if DESE's doing that, which they do, I don't know why we would take any money from these folks.
Mr. Cronin.
I think we're reading a little bit more into this. If I understand this right, Joanne, the governor changed who's in charge of running the program. Okay, we're just continuing on a program we've had for 10 years. That's just the contract has to be redone because instead of dealing with the State Department of Health and Senior Services, now it's the contracts with DESE. So nothing changes. Health Department's doing the same thing they've done for over 10 years, which is help child education and daycare centers. We're not doing anything differently. We're just changing the legal entity on the contract because the governor made a change. Is that correct what I'm saying?
That's correct.
Okay.
Excuse me,
Yep.
so is this contract word for word the same as the previous one? I mean, this is like, there's got 23 pages of attachments. There's a lot of stuff in here. Are we saying that this is pretty much what we've always been approving since 10 years ago, or?
I looked at the old one in 11. I can't tell you it's exactly word for word, but it largely goes through the same things. And I can provide you the old one.
This is very dense, this
Yeah.
attachment. So it's impossible to read it, really. Okay.
I would just say that we did, if in fact we did approve this years ago, that's okay, but that was pre-COVID. Now that we have COVID, we understand how people react to certain rules and how they treat other people and their unnecessary mandates, so we have a lot more knowledge now. So this should be considered differently than it has in the past.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to bill number 5023.
Bill number 5023, requested by Steve Ellman and Kurt Frizz, sponsored by Mike Elam, an ordinance authorizing the execution of an amended St. Charles County Regional Drug Task Force agreement with the county's multi-jurisdictional drug task force.
Any questions or comments about this bill? Chief, is there anything you want to say about this?
No, it's just a line of changes in the agreement that updates.
Gotcha. So with that, we'll move on to bill 5023, or I'm sorry, 5024.
Bill number 5024, requested by Bob Schnur, sponsored by Mike Elam, an ordinance amending the 2021 budget adopted as ordinance 20-094 as amended by transferring unencumbered appropriations between line items in the general fund budget of the Department of the Collector of Revenue, Capital Projects Fund, the Election Authority Fund, and the Prosecuting Attorney Drug Enforcement Fund, and providing related supplemental appropriations to the budgets of the Regional Drug Task Force Fund and the General Fund.
Any questions or comments about this bill? Seeing none, we'll move on to Bill 5025.
Bill number 5025, requested by Samantha Shadrock, sponsored by council as a whole. An ordinance amending sections 115.030, 115.080, 115.130, 115.190, 115.220, 115.300, 115.390, 115.410, 115.430, 115.600, 115.620, 115.670, 115.705, 115.710, 115.721, 115.722, 115.740, and enacting a new section 115.075, and deleting and replacing all of section 115.720 of the ordinances of St. Charles County, Missouri, all concerning the Personnel Administration Plan, including but not limited to benefits.
Any questions or comments about this bill? I think this goes back to what Samantha talked about in the work session earlier today. Up to Bill number 5026.
Bill number 5026, requested by Steve Ellman, sponsored by Mike Elam, an ordinance authorizing the county executive to execute agreements for advocacy and lobbying services.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Cronin.
I'd like to make a request to administration on this one. Our previous transportation lobbyist, Gary Elmstead, a few times a year would send out a little news blast to council members, and I always read them because you could see exactly what Gary was doing, and Gary did a lot to try to get transportation moving. Additionally, when we worked on the pseudoephedrine bill recently, we found out that the state had passed a law that made our work really moot. We didn't have to do it, but nobody told us from the state level. And the pharmacists in this county didn't know that it was legal to sell pseudoephedrine again. So I'm going to make a request to you folks that the folks that are lobbying for our behalf would report to the council. It doesn't that'd be a regular basis, a few times a year, and let us know what they're doing. I appreciate that. Okay.
Well, our lobbyists in Jefferson City, we get a report every Friday. And I've never, we'll make sure that during the session, we get a report every Friday on what's happened. We'll go ahead and just forward that to you.
That'd be great.
As far as Tom is concerned, and he is planning to make a report to you at the January meeting about the federal infrastructure bill.
Okay.
He's looking at that, and there's more to come on exactly how that's going to work out for us.
I think those things were really helpful because I tell you one thing, I'll always remember this, what Gary Elmstead said. He says, I inform you because I want to make sure we're all pulling in the same direction, okay? And I thought that was a good comment from him, so I appreciate that information.
Yeah, no, they do send that to us, and I'm sorry, I should have
No,
sent that to you all along.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else? On to Bill number 5027.
Now, Bill number 5027, requested by Kurt Friz, sponsored by Mike Elam, an ordinance authorizing the county executive to execute an agreement on behalf of the police department with the St. Charles County Ambulance District for remote pilots in command for the county regional SWAT team.
Any questions or comments on this bill? Seeing none, we'll move on to Bill number 5028.
Bill number 5028, requested by Joe Cronin, Mike Elam, Dave Hammond, Terry Hollander, Nancy Schneider, and John White, sponsored by Joe Cronin, Mike Elam, Dave Hammond, Terry Hollander, Nancy Schneider, and John White, an ordinance relating to the redistricting of political townships after each decennial census.
Any questions or comments on this bill? Mr. Brazel.
From what I understand, reading the ordinance, this is the townships and the political 7 districts. Is that correct, Rory?
This particular bill is related to the townships, yes, sir.
Just townships or not county council districts too?
I believe that the council districts was already approved.
Yes.
Yes,
Well, then
so
why
this is
did
just the
why
townships.
did we approve the council districts by resolution and not have to go through an ordinance like this?
That is what the charter requires.
Well, so with this ordinance here, with any substitution on this, it would be irrelevant to the county council districts if there were any changes made?
Yeah, it will not affect the boundary lines for the council districts, that's true.
Right. Well, we all know what a sham that was, but, okay.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Sir.
Yeah, just to further that, the charter envisions you all deciding district map, not me. That's why if it was an ordinance, I could veto it, but it's a resolution, so it's up to you all.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, that wraps up bills for introduction. We move on to any action to be taken on the table bills. Take that as a no. Move on to announcements and miscellaneous. Mr. Cronin.
I'd like everybody here to remember Senator Bob Dole, who just recently passed. As a young man at University of Kansas many, many years ago, I had the opportunity to hear Senator Dole, who represented Kansas, at quite a few different student events. And the School of Political Science at the University of Kansas is now named after Senator Dole. But to me, he's kind of a personal hero because he represented the greatest of the greatest generation, from his World War II service to service in public life. And I think the country should mourn his passing, and he's a legacy that'll be hard to fill. Okay.
Any other comments? Hey, Chief, would you mind to come up and just speak real quick on the highlights of the task force arrest that went down this past week? I know we had, I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of what happened, so.
So we stood it up originally earlier this year as an auto theft task force. It's really merged into more of a crime interdiction task force, which this week we ran a couple operations with 35 to 40 officers, just focused on anti-crime efforts. Breaking into cars is a primary focus and stealing cars, but we also made a lot of other arrests with illegal firearms, with felons in possessions of firearms, a lot of narcotic arrests. They're jumping on burglaries and progresses and making arrests. So it's very proactive policing. In 2 nights, we made 40 arrests. About 35 of those were felony. And 3 of them were actively breaking into cars. That was in O'Fallon. The task force was able to get in the area and take them into custody. And so it's been a very successful operation. All 8 police departments in the county, plus the highway patrol, are involved in it. And, we're just using all available resources and technology to take this on. And it's been very proactive. We're also engaged with St. Louis County Police and agencies over there for information sharing back and forth and to coordinate their operations with our operations. So, any questions?
It was very well done.
Great job.
Okay, thanks.
So I just wanted to say congratulations.
I'm assuming most of them were not out on bail right now either.
Yeah, she said, I'm assuming most of them are not out on bail right now
No
either.
cash bail.
So,
Well, and that's the message we're trying to send. I know that Tim Lomar's office has been very supportive. The judges have been very supportive. So the message is, you come over here, you get caught, you're going to stay here for a little bit, and that's our best
Just
advertising.
wanted to make that point.
It is. Yeah, everybody's been great.
Good.
Chief, I appreciate that. I just wanted to highlight that because there's a lot of talk these days about, people are committing crimes all over, and there's really, as soon as you bring them in, they walk out, and there's really no price to pay. So I think our law enforcement community in St. Charles County deserves a lot of gratitude for what they do and putting their life on the line every day. And I appreciate our law enforcement, or our attorneys, and this prosecuting attorney's office, and they bring them in. If you commit crimes here, you're going to jail. That's just how it is. So I appreciate that.
That's something we can all agree to.
That's something we can all agree on that one. Any last comments? Congratulations on the great Christmas parade, Mr. Brazel.
Yes, it was great. It was.
Fanta-
Thanks for everybody coming down.
Fantastic job there. So with that, I would entertain a motion to dismiss.
Motion. Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are dismissed.
Be good, Brazel.